analysis today proves Green 13 the most comprehensive analysis of foreign data. We have determined that the analysis of peer-reviewed climate papers published over a 21-year period. Surveys of scientists found strong agreement regarding the age of repeated surveys found that scientific agreement has steadily increased. We found 97% endorsements. There's a gap between perception and reality. The narrative presented by the dissenters that the consensus on the point collapse is systematic comprehensive review of the literature provides substantive bank evidence countering its assertion. Papers are taking a detailed use of minuscule proportion of the published resource, and there's a low threshold for runaway warming. Newest studies prove Goal by 13 we present the most complete study of runaway greenhouse using modern input spectroscopic data and line by line treatment of the solar and thermal radiation. Runaway greenhouse has been relevant. There's been high profile speculation that the extreme epidemic global change could be triggered, but this is contrary to existing theory of previous sources that thermal radiation does not depend on This is not correct. Deglaciation might trigger runaway greenhouse as the solar constant increase with time. Earth's future is analogous to this path of revisiting classic planetary science with modern modeling tools have shown that runaway greenhouse might be used to initiate than previously thought. And here, and the risk is existential not. So 10, without early severe reductions in emissions, the effects of climate change are likely catastrophic. Climate change could undermine economies beyond state failure and collapse in developing countries. Unmitigated climate change could pose an existential threat to civilization. There's no such precedent in human experience for such rapid change, and warming shows all human and non-human life on Earth. Throughout Newburgh 99, the Amazon rainforest becomes the Amazon desert. The oxygen levels fall, the climate temperatures go on an excursion as the oceans warm and release carbon dioxide. Plants burn in enormous fires. Earth dies. Earth becomes a second Mars, desolate with a few microbes surviving. And emissions causes ocean acidification. Extinction round 12. The world's oceans may be turning acidic from human carbon emissions. If the threshold carbon emissions continue moving loose, reefs, oysters, salmon, unprecedented rapidity of CO2 release, marine life at risk in a frightening way. This is a recipe for extinction. Ocean dead zones are poised to expand. We are playing a dangerous game, and contentious too is zoonotic disease. Deforestation is the zoonotic disease. Thing 13. Deforestation facilitates the emergence of zoonotic disease. Deforestation facilitates contact between people and novel zoonotic diseases. If people work in degraded ecological systems, they come in contact with novel zoonoses through direct contact or indirect contact, increasing variety of zoonotic pathogens that infect humans. And Mexico's key poor management, no legislation, and insufficient education and poor diagnosis capacity. Martin's 11 News diseases and persistent progress in Latin America. Reasons for this are numerous: lack of animal health care legislation, insufficient education, poor diagnosis capacity. Disease pressure is high with 75% of the emerging diseases affecting humans related to animals at an earlier stage. The problem gets worse with poor management as it happens in Mexico. Diseases are uniquely in Mexico, and new zoonotic diseases causes extinction. No burnout because of ineffectivity precedes symptoms. Quamin 12. Diseases all around us are under ordinary circumstances, but conditions aren't ordinary. Zoonosis can spill over into people. Zoonotic pathogens can hide within reservoir host organisms, carry the pathogen while suffering with little illnesses. SARS could have been much worse if the virus had been arrived in a different city. It might have burned through the humanity. In 1918 occurred before globalization. The next big one will likely conform to 1918. High infectivity preceding notable symptoms. Move through airports. Airborne rabies would have been the most horrific pathogen on the planet. The influenza is a well-adapted to airborne transmission. Human transmission is the crux. There's a possibility of disaster. No other primate has waited up on the planet like we do. We're an outbreak, and outbreaks end. And zoonotic diseases are uniquely devastating. Kiss the devil. 12. No existential threats to humanity. Disease. Recent decades have proved that unequivocal evidence for the ability of pathogens to cause extinction of the entire species. The view that infectious diseases were not a cause of extinction was predicated on the notion that pathogens require host. The calculation does not apply to microbes because they're acquired directly from the environment. They have no need for host. Microbes pose with greater threat than known pathogenic microbes. And the impact defense is just naive optimism. Gregor 6. The single biggest threat to human is a virus. The newest diseases were advanced patrols of a great army. There are catastrophes ahead because the pathogens keep evolving. Our immune systems have to keep adapting to keep up. The animals who stop running go extinct. The human race is losing the race. The human evolutionary capacity may be totally consequential. Optimism might easily transmute to a tune whistled whilst passing a graveyard. The next 5 years is key. Nash 12. Viruses jump from animals to wreak havoc because their astonishing capability to spread rapidly when we least expect it. Then we must accept an animal or originate a pandemic within the next 5 years. Cataclysmic effects on the human race. Thanks to our hyper-connected world, this virus will already have begun crossing the globe before we even have the best brains and begin to chisel away at the genetic secrets. It'll cut lethal swath through the world's population. That's the plan. The United States federal government should finance reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation in Mexico. Contention 3 is solvents. U.S. reforestation engagement with Mexico creates a global model that invigorates broader emissions cuts and solves warming. Shankelman 13 is schemes to ensure that reducing emissions and deforestation was a source of progress in faltering negotiations to tackle climate change. Tackling deforestation will be part of the global deal. The successes of red hands in the balance of Mexico as a current country with other governments can learn from implementing red. Urgent engagement is not crucial. If there's to be a decision reached in 2015, achieving this is still possible. Mexican experience has to be emulated and promised. Emission savings and forest protection schemes delivered. And Mexico has the institutional framework in place, but significant outside investment is key. NCF 11. Mexico set its aspirational target for REDD is the key for addressing deforestation. Significant investment is required to achieve climate. There's a clear need for mobilization and investment. Challenges include the need for financial services. Financing categorizes more further instruments. Mexico has appreciated the opportunity to be a pilot. The forest investment plan in Mexico will become a landmark. Mexico is one of biologically diverse countries. Mexico's ecosystems have been subjected to profound change, and despite the historical success of reforestation efforts, more investment is needed to overcome institutional inertia. Evans 13 agencies, NGOs, and private sector celebrate recent successes in forest protection and calls for much greater future investment. More success is needed. Emissions accelerated. The result is the spirit of deforestation must be part of any climate strategy. Payments for reward conservation developed countries transfer money where conservation occurs. This could be a game changer. A halt in deforestation. REDD has not progressed as fast as it hopes. Interim measures can build momentum. Decisions would have dramatic effects for rapid effects promoting supporting that action in the tropical forest countries. And the alternative to the plan is an unrestrained corporate destruction. A revamped REDD solves warming and overcomes traditional economic criticisms. Toward the return, a new paradigm of growth is emerging through REDD. By valuing carbon, the REDD is changing. Incentive sales of REDD carbon credits will give communities credit for choosing a sustainable pathway. REDD is at a crossroads, yet it's working. They need more support. The world continues to lose forests at a long rate. An area the size of Manhattan every day. Forests are vital to well-being. They determine water supplies, house biodiversity, hotspots, and flood shelter for half a billion people. MNCs play a significant role in driving forest loss. So they'll be pivotal to the solution. Payments for conservation is essential. Deforestation must be part of the solution, and that solution will require economic incentives. Forest conservation and sustainable supply management require REDD, and specifically, reforestation solves feedback loops and ocean acidification. Sprouts 13 billion 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide was absorbed by the ocean, threatening marine ecosystems. So carbon taken from forests isn't threatening ocean life. There's a feedback loop to keep in mind. Preventing deforestation slows climate change. That leads to more deforestation. So far, the U.S. has not contributed a cent, but the serious move needs to bulk REDD's funding could certainly help. But the emissions cuts alone won't work because of already emitted carbon. Only reforestation can avert dangerous warming, CH14, regenerative practices, turn the back carbon clock, boosting soil productively. Productivity, solar carbon sequestration needs to be a part of the picture, and top priorities are restoring land supply side approaches, amounts of reshuffling the Titanic deck chairs. If we overlook the demand side solutions where carbon should go, CO2 cannot be reduced to safe levels in time unless the other side of the atmospheric CO2 balance is included. Storing carbon in soil is simple, and the plan lists global reforestation first is modeling. With foreign assistance build Mexican REDD credibility that's emulated globally. Brave 13 REDD is evolving towards new large-scale bilateral foreign assistance efforts that focus on forest monitoring and governance. Mexico presents a global model for the community forest enterprises. Mexican model is based on supportive government policy. And second, donations. Mexico forests provide key germplasms for the global forest. Romero 3, Mexico is the center of biodiversity in the genus Pinus and large donor forest tree germplasm for tree plantations worldwide. Deforestation rare and endemic Mexican pines. Mexican government have a large reforestation program. However, seedlings under such a program will have low survivorship. And third, only the U.S. solves global environmental governance. At Siena Ivanova 8. Flash President of the Global Research Institute observed that the extraordinary confrontation on the environment matters reflects an alarm on climate change and frustration with the U.S. The President must re-engage international cooperation. Essential similar efforts will be required to protect biological diversity, restore forests. The U.S.'s leadership is crucial and necessary given its economic and strategic powers as well as the financial and technological powers. The U.S. leadership can influence international environmental policy and produce effective environmental governance. Conversely, when the U.S. declines to exercise leadership, the impact is significant. And when AC's narrative of environmental risk is motivating and drives individual activism, Belgium 12% goes hand in hand with activism. Improving perceived risk to be the greatest to describe climate change using conflict and language of such apocalypse to encourage fatalism. We would expect alarmists to be less likely to have engaged in environmental behavior. To the contrary, alarmists were significantly more likely to have taken personal action to reduce emissions, and respondents who perceived climate change as less pathetically alarmed are most engaged in global warming. They're most convinced that it's happening and urgent. The alarm from contagions in their own lives and supporting an aggressive national response. It's specifically a desire to avert catastrophe that encourages pro-environmental behavior. Those who would think that environmental problems pose a serious threat practice activism rather than giving way to fatalistic resignation. Apocalyptic beliefs also motivate lobbying and public information campaigns and shift legislative priorities. People who may have moved beyond making superficial changes, making substantial and permanent ones, are quite likely to subscribe to the apocalyptic narratives. This association is not arbitrary. There's something powerful and compelling about the apocalyptic narrative. Narrativization is essential if the message is to be persuasive. Stories encourage action in the real world, even as they invoke an imaginary one. We have to try to imagine continuations of our narrative. Apocalyptic narrative helps adherents determine how to act by providing a storyline.
Okay, prep. Is it 10 minutes? So I want to get clear what the mandate of the plan is. The plan has the U.S. give money to Mexico for reducing emissions from deforestation. How do you do that? What do you fund?
Well, this is a program, right? So the UN decided that one of the ways, according to the Kyoto Protocol, that countries could sign on to like reduce emissions and become more environmentally friendly. One was through cuts in emissions, things like that, and the other one was through technology and initiatives that would sequester carbon. So this is one of the initiatives.
So I just want to know what the plan does. Does it invest? Does it give money to Mexico when they sequester carbon? Does it actually invest in trees? What does it do?
Yeah, it has the USFG invest in this initiative, which is called Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Degradation. It would involve a couple of things. So it would involve planting trees throughout Mexico, like lots of trees, so that it could sequester enough carbon. It also involves private investors would be incentivized to buy plots of land in order to preserve.
I don't want to know how you solve it. I just want to know what the app does.
Yeah, so that's what it does. It invests in.
Does it give loans to the private investors? Like, what does the app do?
Okay, well, at its most basic level, it invests in this initiative, the reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation in Mexico. It gives financing, literally money.
Financing for planting trees.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Planting
Does
trees.
it give it to the Mexican government or to individual investors?
To the Mexican government, probably. Yeah.
Cool. So it would involve talks with the Mexican government to be able to plant trees.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
Okay.
they're giving the financing for it.
Cool. So, let's talk about the I just want to get clear also the impacts. There is a warming impact, an ocean acidification impact, and a disease impact, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Let's talk about the zoonotic disease impact. You're seeing evidence says that deforestation increases contact with zoonotic disease. Your common evidence also says that disease is all around us. Why is reducing deforestation sufficient to prevent all zoonotic disease?
Well, it's not all zoonotic disease. So the thing is that there's so much of like the earth that's been unexplored because a lot of it is in dense rainforests. When you start deforesting, you get deeper into these forests. You encounter new animals. You interact, like humans interact with these animals, and that's how zoonotic diseases occur. It's encountering new species and new environments that humans are unaccustomed to, and they can't
how
handle
does the plan prevent animals from interacting with each other completely? I don't understand.
The thing is that all of these diseases would be totally unprecedented because you're going into unexplored parts of the forest. So if you stop deforesting and
why stopping deforestation might reduce the likelihood of disease a little bit. I am confused
it's not
why
that
it is guaranteed to stop extinction level disease.
We agree that right now diseases may not be a major problem, but the diseases that you would encounter when you went deeper into these rainforests are much drastically different than the ones that we know about right now.
So if the diseases in the trees are worse, why should we plant them?
I'm sorry, it's not the diseases in the trees, it's what you encounter when you go deeper into these rainforests that are unexplored.
We'll take a break.
Oh, no, that's good.
251.
251, and how much did you use before? 4 seconds, was it?
I believe so.
I view it like 622 remaining.
Yeah, so the order is going to be 5 off, the disease, and then warming contention.
Does anyone have to?
Do you want to jam this? Just any more paper? Like put the rest of them back in there.
What's the case order?
Disease and then warming. Let me know when you know already. All right. Okay, we're good. First off is the patent reform DA will pass now broad bipartisan support for post-breach vote. PCs key to small and 410 managers. The memo will be circulated to the committee. The leadership of the break committee will consider the bill first week of the back committee no responses. Now we have bipartisan agreement. The president is now given home to reformers. Senators close to deal the House supports in the Innovation Act. The plan steps. Obama's PC share 13 economic runs the risk of BC is countdown to governments. More considered publicly implemented. And the problems because of amendment after play down this crime. These strategies got economic growth that welcome vulnerable to the charge down the region over issue chief officer with the economic problems. Critics reinterpret taking a soft line and passing the policy to collide with concerns of lobbying and expect for station like collide putting back some threats to the political risk as Congress negotiates immigration perception and security cooperation weakening and complains to those who oppose immigration perceptions can be distorted. Drug wars are flipped with power and universities are on the brink of large-scale patent sales to shows that causes public backlash that crushes federal research funding but reform saw spelled into 28 and sometimes university holding that puzzle threat to control the safety net becoming down to AT and UTM and get response against selling patents to TNP and there are serious consequences for university patent developed with federal funds perspective raised on consideration being used to harm business stands with MPs can be risk of university public anger about petroleum focus on university got much more to lose in terms of dollars university for relevant as Congress considered reform and reforms the implement for the program proliferation have a chance to come to activity and university research funding is the backbone of the nuclear conflict it's keeping stockpile maintenance and attribution for nuclear terrorism. This is Miller 7. These must have a highly quality advantage graduates for nuclear security. Yes, government must serve as a steward for nuclear research education. Nuclear research cannot be just financial but used research for signal preparation for funding university. Provides should research separate professionals at the university as secondly to R&D results. To reliably security US stockpile defense against terrorism requires new approaches to nuclear contamination across the country and to targeting university innovation fields. That's key to deterrence. Townsend and 9. Obama made clear the use of robust deterrence of economic concerns in sound-based and nuclear laboratories to ensure quick training young and talented scientists political units are efficient laboratories that trends of meaningful work. The impact is global nuclear war perception is key. Caves and 10 using to modernize its force economic otherwise trying to take challenges for rising peers. Deserve as for required so movement modernization fundamentals avoiding widespread comms perceptions over compromise. Determine program application efforts could be challenged used more directly. The expectation the US will be less prepared to threaten as well as to keep the US from communicating its power allies could use those within the issues they concept by coming to rivals in the shadow which in short term require their own deterrence. Major work occurs every civic use must calculate to quickly to important vulnerabilities discover most of the discussion. Now next off is the NATO bad DA. Mexican ag reform is not passing now. Internal political opposition good in 513. As scientific information makes them for decision made and not easy. National Confederation comes in more internal moments in the areas that agree with the mindset of the conservative native already scanning governments not to approve regulations. The plan boosts NATO gives them a win that's key to his agenda. Farms within 12. The federal reform agenda will be the new president's greatest stress. The new Mexican president policies such as party security creation of the UN and reform will play the Georgia is one to list for the United States the largest post that agriculture that allows the to push ag reforms through that devastates Mexican corn diversity and small farms. Silver and 12. The House Republic was not presented to Congress. The United States agriculture movement succeed the bill. It's pending will be voted for Congress and more political opportunity to best defense corn farmers diversity. Pending reform request by Monsanto's plan was signal watershed minute we have to put its input on the deal. Mexico's diverse maize as it continues the trade the dry tolerance passes that we need to lose and we're going to reduce our ability to respond to climate change. Other that's lots of corn diversity causes extinction. Mexico is keep voicing for 13 the role of the lies small number of crop parties with production monoculture corn gives you the good corn variants from obsolete raw material for variety relay race comes from the agriculture parties that group of small farmers in centers of diversity like Mexico kids corn continue active tax stewardship or for sustainability agriculture war Mexico maintains the reservoir adaptation of course with the future new present climate change will cause a serious concepts about who gets depends on the team small farm. Now next up is the neoliberal kid. The acts attempt to increase free trade in Latin America is a form of neoliberal engagement that exacerbates inequality and justifies endless intervention which causes extinction. We have a moral obligation to reject that. Macron on 6 and the globalization of global race crimes and partition of global resources neoliberalism direction about Latin America. Neoliberalism defense common poverty exacerbate global inequality championing development. There's a financial the new class of political class that neoliberalism create prosperity of transit position that could be turned into international agencies. Short comes also pandemic that suffer Latin America conscious of Venezuela, Cuba have rejected foreign controls in favor of nutrition, wealth, renationalization, prioritize healthcare and education, sharing recent fit the military radiation involved Latin America, all countries that are capacity, U.S. security, the use and the capacity, what is good for the economy, what serves the public good is going fast, and alternatives to decolonize economic engagement, questioning the politics of space and knowledge that make engagement and economic tool manipulation is key to sustainable development. Washington 12 political states, relationship to culture, politics, politics, economics, weapons, and regions, both local and global states, which we can search for new ways of thinking, no comprehending, feeling, articulating, and permits to intervene in culture and central acts and struggles for such an region, and to focus on these two questions, control, strength, the USA, central experts, knowledge, friends, the dominant universities, cultural understanding, such as decolonization projects, serve the work in bodies, geopolitics, knowledge, defense, attention to the struggle, subject knowledge, centralization of every roots, represent problems, the identity of Latin America, critical method, perspective, we're seeing the process of collective thought, epistemology, and transformation, is decolonization, frameworks, knowledge, everything to check out such position to find out the meaning of working culture. Now, next up is the Counterplan text. The United States federal government should create an international affairs realignment commission modeled on the defense-based closure and realignment commission for the purpose of reforming the State's Department and USAID, asking them to include recommendations on finance, reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation of as a part of their proposal. That solves the case and does not link to politics, nor to performance state and USAID as impossible to the hardest of the state. Determined to develop approach foreign affairs modeled on the bracket process was a high-level part of the external commission, but its recommendation as an all-nothing issue. The president can accept project bracket direction to the authority commission because short PTA amendments to receive its finance to the president. Our recommendation becomes law and to security secretary out of the process and focus on fiscal installations. International affairs realignment commission will not look to fiscal process because all concepts embassies USAID missions abroad. More importantly, we recommend regulation B. Commission started renewing the number of USAID missions around the globe. Commission could build this movement. Now, next up is topicality interpretation. Economic engagement is exclusively economic. Jack state and said economic engagement, economic to engage forces on exclusively economic engagement foreign policy. Economic engagement record of the state engagement target strategy and multiply the targets run foreign policy return the march potential only violation. The F is an energy measure and only involves itself with deforestation, which is not economic. Voting issue. First is limits. There are countless non-economic engagement policies to explode the negative research burden. Second is ground. The F denies access to key disciplines by changing the ground from our economies, which kills fairness in economic education. Now, the disease advantage. One, they do not solve the entirety of disease. The plan only engages with Mexico over deforestation measure, which is not sufficient to set an international model. Second, there's no impact to disease. They burn out drones by the 2005. Homo sapiens has managed to survive disease and challenge the existence of natural skeletal barriers. General limiting death, they produce gene more likely to spread the germs and not kill the host quickly, likely the predator classification of those subclasses spread by human cause. Third, their impacts are about deforestation bad, not reforestation good. There's no global modeling internally put to the plan does not prevent us from going to even Mars. Infectious diseases do not cause extinction. Population density mitigates virulence through resistance. Parallel even virulent disease do not cause extinction because population density so determines the remaining individual more resistant. It's not making possible that extinction will caused by some pathogen and disease burnout, which prevents spread. Worse than for the many infections getting introduced, and they consequently don't have a way to get from person to person. Lucky thing they don't have any mission means of transmission. It's not easy thing to do, and government response solves the Zakaria 9. We can really anticipate the virus response to swine flu had social characteristics that were like research to worry, but it's not spread too far and fast. The swine flu is met by an extremely vigorous response to epicenter. The government reacts quickly, quarantine, and infectious testing others. Run education because it's better for more widespread.
Burnout applies to the zoonotic diseases
Burnout applies to
arguments
zoonotic
in the context of fungus for
their
individual species, not in the context of
species, not in the context of humans.
They have no evidence that there would be a disease that
they have no
for the
evidence
entirety
of
of humanity.
Burnout theory disproves the impact over 5. This further infectious disease infection is definitely host the impact population decline population like this to describe as population declines. The parasite affects the reproduction of the parasite the reproductive density is susceptible to host level which will breed a parasite increase no positive host specific pathogen you cannot drive host to extinction. More warming. One, there's no warming impact. Mitigation, adaptation, solves medicine, not climate change. The same as alarms and misleading immediate behaviors of extremely low population lead to catastrophic consequences. Science and economics clear that emissions will lead to consequences predicted impacts assumed adaptation expects never correct because people adapt. And warming is inevitable even when we cut emissions to zero. The stability in time. Several recent studies have demonstrated CO2 use change is reversible. Human timescale climate change renewable reversible complete cessation of emissions. They affect whether we combated by shelf collapse and extreme accident ice discharge. Our findings like to be gross and oceans are resilient. This is Kennedy 2. Marine ecosystems are resilient. Biological components are coupled to physical factors allowing them to respond to environmental change. We're rendering them adaptable species have genetic variability with level of adaptation. No extinction from climate change. And IPCC in 11 the IPCC predicted low temperatures increased by 40 to 60 degrees Celsius. Increase we are having to form in terms of magnitude and rate change. A lot of communities have remained resilient and thrive. The purpose of spread of sound scientific ways for understanding biotic responses used to vaccinate spreads we can exploit. When CO2 concentration increased temperatures increase by greater than 4 degrees Celsius in 6 years, what emerges is evidence for rapid turnover migration development ecosystems. There is very little evidence for broad scale extinction. Urge caution and assuming extinction fossil record indicates a more remarkable biotic resilience and adaptation. Check the impact. The NDCA in 11 and evaluating species avoid extinction have always been able to deal with the changes. Several studies have demonstrated the quantities of numerous plants and animals that just do that evolution prepare response mostly intact even in the face of warning. Developing countries lax regulation and profit maximization mean warming is inevitable. As a supporter in 13 even American call for the recalls they have not come to make of the goal being developed in developing countries civilization to avoid catastrophic climate change. Only about 1/3 of the enormous reserves can be released. Micron does not work until the case not a single oil company took in the picture of the problem CO2 and Margaret and Nancy after Harvard and they cannot solve the 30-year gap makes warming inevitable. This is Walker and King and probably need more cards. The world experiences significant changes in climate. Whatever we do now, the ocean is like a flow effect will be felt for decades. Whatever we do now to change our carbon habits will take several decades to have an effect. The next 30 days will be more or less the same whether we can quickly keep the carbon habit.
Also, sequestration doesn't solve. There's no
warrant
as to why it's sufficient to solve any short term because all of their impact are during the context of short-term warming.
Their impact are during the context of short-term warming. The app does not do that.
And here.
Marine life is resilient, which solves their oceans argument. This is the ICPOP. In his hand, marine organisms have natural resistance to changes in their habitats combined with their breeding strategies provide mechanisms for coping with fluctuations and other events. An important reproducing strategy is the production of vast numbers of eggs and larvae. And consensus building can lead to unintentional bias. They're not infallible. This is Curry 12. Confirmation bias is well known for psychological principle that constantly they seek and interpreting evidence in ways that are partial to existing beliefs, expectations, existing hypotheses, prior beliefs, can as good totalization of the ability subsequent this direction, the field which itself, individual's assessment can influence the group dynamic, the range of uncertainty, the number of X's associated with their estimates. The last part is marked the word estimates.
Can you have those cards?
Yeah. Do you have a flash drive?
I think I gave it to
Do you guys have a flash drive?
Done last.
What are the cards?
Do you mind if I start? No, let me just get these out.
Why is live internet cameras a selling point for a pizza place? On the side of the box it says live internet cameras.
It might be like Rick's, where you could check to see how long the line is.
Maybe.
Alright, so let's talk about politics.
Yep.
Your Mullins evidence seems
Sure.
to indicate that Leahy's doing a lot of the work on making sure that all the, all the things that are going into this bill are compromised by both sides. Where does this indicate that Obama's push is key?
You're right. The uniqueness evidence does not make an Obama push argument. Obviously, that's an internal link that we would extend
Okay.
later in the block. This Mullen evidence does not say that Leahy is the reason why the passage is occurring right now. He's making a statement that there's
So
a
is
enormous
there a
progress right now.
PC key argument in the 1NC?
I think this piece of Mullen evidence does provide a sufficient reason as to why there's momentum occurring right now in this
Where do
status
you
quo.
think that this card
I don't think
is?
we've read our best evidence on Obama being key yet.
Okay, can you point me any line in this card where
I
you
just
think
said I
this
don't think we've
is
read our
key?
best evidence on Obama being key.
There's no warrant in why.
I mean, the argument is that he's fostering a compromise right
Alright,
now.
that's
over
fine.
patent
Let's talk
reform.
about the link evidence. The Shear card is talking about security interventions in Mexico and drug interventions. Why is planting
No.
trees in Mexico
Right,
similar
right.
to this?
See, that's a mischaracterization of the link evidence into the concept of economic growth not directly addressing drug issues and violence issues, which are the reason why people are hesitant to engage in economic engagement with Mexico. The plan would be seen as diverting away from drug issues and violence issues, which is what is unpopular with the large swaths of Congress.
Okay, that's fine. So let's talk about the Nieto dissent then.
Yeah.
Where do you think this Farnsworth evidence says that the plan would boost Nieto?
See, the argument by the plan, I mean, it does say economic engagement would be what gives NATO momentum.
No, it doesn't. It says the new Mexican president needs policy successes to consolidate power and secure congressional
The
majorities.
two countries are intertwined.
The United States is largely focused on economic policy.
Right, see, no,
I
that's
don't see
not
that.
what that evidence says. The United States has an important role to play. It's talking about in the context of U.S.-Mexico engagement. The two countries are intertwined. The to-do list for the United States is largely focused on economic policy, therefore expanding economic
So where
policy.
do you, this is all very interesting, but where do you think this evidence says that the plan would give Nieto sufficient political power to push this unpopular policy?
Right, see, this Farnsworth evidence is in the context of how the plan would be perceived. It would be perceived as a win. The silver evidence indicates that new wins, momentum, whatever Nieto gets from engagement with the U.S. gives him momentum for other reforms. That silver evidence makes the follow-through claim.
That's fine. Let's talk about the critique.
Yep.
In what way does the affirmative try to increase free trade in Latin America as a form of neoliberal engagement?
Right, see, regardless of how good you think the intent of the 1AC is, this Makwana evidence indicates that increasing economic contacts between
Your
the U.S. and
Makwana
Mexico and
evidence
others.
is talking about past
I can answer your
neoliberal
question.
policies like NAFTA.
You're right. That is one example
So
of
why
an
is
economic policy.
literally
between
us
the
giving
US.
money to plant trees and
Right, see-
conserve forests in Mexico?
I think that's a very nice
considered
spin that you
neoliberal
put on the
trade
1AC. The Makwana evidence goes a step further and says that engagement tactics, no matter how they're perceived by the U.S.,
Do you have
Are
any
insidious.
evidence
Also,
in
if
the
it's
context?
true that that yours is perceived differently than all the economic engagement we've had in the past, that's probably a reason that is not
Do
topical.
you wait? What? Do you have any
If
evidence
it's not,
in the
if it's
context of
perceived
what
differently
the
of
Do
economic
you have any
engagement,
evidence in
then
the
it's not.
context of the mechanism
not-
of the affirmative that's not speaking to
Right,
past?
you're-
I agree. Awful neoliberal policies like that.
Miranda, you're right. This evidence is not in the context of engagement
Right.
in the context of
Okay.
deforestation
Thank
policy,
you.
but it's in the context of free trade, which I think is a sufficient assumption.
All right, we're starting prep.
This is yours, right?
Oh, that is our stand?
Yes, I got a stand first.
We haven't had a stand this whole tournament.
How does that work out?
Awfully.
Bad. We spoke off of trash cans. Okay. The order will be the disease advantage first, then the warming advantage. Then it would be T, politics, neolib, NDCA, actually neolib, counterplan, NDCA.
Neolib counterplan.
What was the Octos order again?
Yeah. Should I just start from the top? Okay. Disease first, warming, then T, politics, neolib, counterplan, Mexico politics.
Let me pull up the JC doc.
I am it too.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Zoonotic disease incubation force triggers extinction. It spreads between species and humans have no natural immunity. Long incubation period means there's no burnout and it's impossible to catch it before it's too late. That's a Casadeva and Gregor evidence. The next 5 years are key because that when the mutations are going to start. Now the affirmative is uniquely key to solve it because deforestation is where zoonotic diseases, deforest land is where zoonotic diseases incubate, and the more land we clear, the more we risk exposure to dangerous pathogens. Now they say burnout. That doesn't assume zoonoses. That was above. Also mutations from combining few strains prevent burnout. Carbon-9 with H1N1 mutations seen in several countries. The Chinese and for words warning on the potential for a super combination of bird flu, swine flu, influenza species, and tourists were making sloppy copies of themselves, swapping genetic code, creating superbugs. Pandemic with the population to wipe out majority of human populations worldwide. The virus spreading in response to virus terminal with not influenza virus and produced a completely new strain. Our disease is unique interspecies jumps Gregor and 6 only used 5 with jumps Gregor when chicken humans pulled. One of its greatest chicks nag we are infecting waterfowl, we're chaining fatty humans while we're demanding relatively harmless from migratory wars, enabling the virus to win itself around the world. The prosperity of eradication seems remote. They say we also lead to global reforestation with solve deforestation. They say we don't, but they say we don't solve deforestation. Reforestation is what we solve now. They say it doesn't cause extinction. That was answered about. It can spread between viruses and humans won't be able to check it. Also, it collapses the institutions that necessarily check it. Burnout. It's going to collapse the institutions like disease prevention, which necessarily could check it, but they won't because the response isn't fast enough. Government response won't be sufficient because the mutations happen too quickly. That's a nice evidence. It talks about the next 5 years. Now they say something about fungus. None of our evidence is about fungus. It's about fungus. It's about zoonoses in the tropics. Now the warming advantage. Triad warming causes state failure, collapse of the economy, destroys biosphere. That's the Vato evidence. Rampant fires will leave only microbes and we leave only microbes alive. That's some Brandenburg evidence. We won't be able to adapt because carbon dioxide is already emitted in the atmosphere. We can only stop it by taking that out. But forests act as natural carbon sinks, which means that they can sequester carbon that's already in the air, which means it's not inevitable. It's only inevitable if we don't act. Oceans are resilient because of the massive amount of carbon dioxide that's being emitted. It's causing coral reef dead zones. The ocean warming does lead to extinction. Prefer massive evidence there. Evidence from the NIPCC is obviously not qualified, not setting consensus of scientists. Adaptation isn't sufficient. That was above. There's no 30-year gap in the warming debate because of the global evidence says there's a low threshold for runaway warming. No sequestration is the only way to solve it in the short term because trees can store 1 ton of carbon dioxide each million life. It's not resilient. That was above. And there's no confirmation biases because we cite consensus of 97% of scientists. Topicality. We meet RDD is not economic engagement. That's a policy report. Bunch of 10. The latest report major economic engagement. RDD frequently referred to counter-intervention, tech loans, and HOTS, and 2K economic engagement offer tangible steps to export credits, investment insurance, promotion, access to technology, loans, and economic aid. We meet because RDD is government AI, Paul Trust, and 12 RDD is a scheme involving developed economic countries, but developed countries are being discovered to government find and prefer. Our interpretation defies economic engagement is determined by the only defining engagement background. No US key arguments on the A train, only topic also precision with our interpretation grammatical because the rest says it's in government don't trade themselves. And I find a number of countries lit-based checks when sale of core generics only vote on T. If we've made them possibly negative, slightly more difficult, otherwise competing interpretations occurs race and bottom politics. Obama's PC all dried up, all fine. Actually, scratch out. Nothing passes before the election. O'Keefe for there are 75 days left. Either for both parties. Sequence square. The first would be fourth would be on legislative. There's no final passage. Think about the bill. The minimum wage Congress is going to pledge each year pass a new budget. Federal support for insurance policies. To last to acts of terrorism, but inspired by any of you lawmakers are likely to wait until later. Democrats, Republicans trying to do little to rock a little vote until election day. Very little legislation. Only things about pass will find somebody to open office. Ambitious by legislature will have to just wait until after the elections. He's pushed all species. Now keep to Rollo. 413. I believe we'll have to balance competing interests against bill. of cost of leads, facing pressure to benefit the fact that the current compromise completely is committed to effective solution. We've been talking to Democrats about partisan start, get a result of lobbies called the EFCs and legislature get support from both sides of the aisle. Negotiation are at an impasse to leasing instead Wilson. 4-7 legislation the crackdown on pound tools of growing contentious consensus brewing difficult to mark up and delayed talks around life support with principal negotiation and miles part of the bill is in danger of not moving forward. Frustration led to an impasse midterm election politics set to intensify. The current bill is insufficient to solve. That's crime before A. The current patent law is not in urgent need to perform the real solution must be bigger than growing after patent trolls and addressing patent quality. The loss to the economy caused by junk patents far exceeds $29 billion per year. The growth cost of junk patents are egregious. The companies continue to obtain junk patents and acts of patent trolls are competing corner markets and ensure emerging technology won't compete. The link is about immigration legislation in Mexico. That fight already happened. Disproves the link, but it's not the reforestation funding is popular. That's Wilson and 12 reducing emission for RDD is one of the areas of strongest climate action by Obama politically. Forest conservation is non-partisan issue in the U.S. with broad Republican good congressional support. Independent currently controversial climate policies. First mover isn't key because economic growth can come from downstream utilization of other countries' tech. That's GAMA and some of the potential companies, including more American studies, science-based and misconception of innovation, works paying too much attention to upstream development of new tech and too little downstream cost of turning inventions, product downstream innovation, most valuable kind. Most of the value accrues to the users, not creators. Marketing creators, not the critique. Actually, yeah. Okay. Nuclear deterrence fails Benson before the U.S. has collected deterrence where it should not have needed this for aggravating relations, mistakes, and applied deterrence that come from faulty threat assessments, forgetfulness by history, short-sighted policymaking, market policymaking critique. Our actual basis is the affirmative to defend the landscape for small term with a mechanism like action as key defense and block for the after winning against world outbalance, the action against offense against the needs used to achieve an alternate nation building accountable for sovereignty, resistance, uniqueness, concerns. Now, neoliberalism is not the root cause of our term. These utopian and productive prefer epistemology, Deuteronomy 12 to basic to nurture more anxiety, rigorous knowledge, useful for policy, basic research is crucial to invest in specificity, Latin America, doing causal relation that carefully qualified, making this lean trade openness is conducive to poverty, relative preponderance, evidence of questions, and truly, artists find evidence of questions have been trained, growing more pro-core, not how divides and probable alternative generalization, maybe a little help market, have little help failure to provide not accessible alternatives, rather continues built Havelock and 14 critical geopoliticians, successful altering discourse that successful altering hegemonic structures, critical geopoliticians, far from the borders, power, little decision making, bureaucrats, political scientists, change from within is more effective than change from without now, marketed without now, permutation to the plan, all competitive force of the alternative core of the app is redirecting corporate management of the status quo into which is exponentially more devastating to the environment. Their links to the status quo, not to reforestation. That's Buchanan. Now, reforestation provides an ethical shift that solves current systems of violence. That's Nixon 11 tree planting, creates symbolic help for political resistance. The movement articulate discourse of violence and allows to deeper narrative Jericho about the movement. Intersectional alignments by aligning with cultural civil rights. Tree planting is a symbol pragmatic, powerfully figured back solar and deforestation, corrosive threats. Forging compound alliance with authoritarianism, casualties, market casualties, commissions conflict. Conditionalities of living industry, choosing strategy, only species during offense, counter-interpretation is one condition, obviously solves your offense. Also, permutation due to the counterplan, permutation due to the plan in a world where the BRAC agrees to it, permutation due to the BRAC model fails. That's for mayor and some of the questions, but the BRAC model can see in other policy areas, independent commissions have a poor record. There have been very few instances where they have resolved legislative impasses, conditions that make BRAC successful are rarely present, do not apply where there is controversy strong. Congressional opposition to accountable mayor and some BRAC became increasingly politicized with allegations of long-running political pressure, complexity of the decision-making process, concerned about politicization played a role in Congress and Republicans consider further rounds. Uncertainty is key to first movers from reforestation. That's all and 10 hurdles remain due to high risk of monetizing credits as any investment climate change policy must provide long-term certainty when risks are lower carbon. Speculators will be early movers and private follow-on McFarland and 10. Private equity groups are more focused on clean tech, but can expand their financing toward RDD if legislative financing is revealed now. Deforestation leads to deforestation collapses fungus populations at CE99 soil can be picked by the same corn fungi or destroyed fungi live in symbiotic relations with trees and deforestation fungi will not grow that. Causing extinction winter time is difficult to know that's how poor fungi the well-being is necessary for sustainable life on the planet without them we're finished their nature's recyclers we don't miss them until the south market at Southern Louisiana. They said secondary energy legislation thumbs the bill that's around 328 constitutional energy reforms approved by Mexico will be fortified by secondary energy legislation to be passed this month. Although the plan is unpopular at STAR and 12, the implication of Mexican national stability as Mexican relations nearly insurmountable obstacle to political clients and fear being tried to straighten the nation preventing Mexican leaders from seeking allies in the U.S. Mexicans who ignore this time UK rights opponents on NAFTA formed an alliance with the U.S. leading accusation of having ordered change your traders campaigns against Mexican security anxiety by U.S. political alliances and trust without tolerance for cross-border political alliances. Much less developed. Also, Neo's only pushing energy that's made in 14 purity will continue to push for binding referendum on energy reform. Neo's funding himself to push for the secondary voting legislation so he can pass them through. Also, U.S. Mexico economic engagement now covers trade security and marijuana. That's sanctions in 14 on February 19th. Obama and Nieto will meet on marijuana security, but NAFTA and trade are topics of focus of the summit will be trading Mexico's role in leading NAFTA. Also, corn biofuel expansion is an all-cost true impact. Schnepp and 13 is U.S. ethanol industry's growing so as a share of the corn crop is higher prices for corn use to higher competition for cropland and intense agricultural activities. Consequence for grains, livestock, land, energy markets, water, quality water, resource availability.
That was 31 seconds.
Cool.
Just want to clarify the theory arguments, only conditionality.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Disease scenario. So you made an argument about how the plan would be able to affect global spread of disease. How exactly do you affect disease spread in like Asia, for example?
Yeah, well, Mexico is a global model for reforestation. That was our SNAP card. So if Mexico can set a precedent for doing reforestation policy,
gotcha. I understand that's like the argument you're trying to make. I'm curious as to why that would ever be the case. Like, who's going to model the plan?
Let's look to the evidence of the 1AC, which is actually really fantastic on this question. So
okay, well, who models the plan? I don't even need like what your evidence says. Like, who would like
other
feasibly
countries worldwide would
like
sign
who?
on to the REDD.
Like who?
The REDD is a program through the UN. So countries who are deforesting now, like Brazil, countries like
what
China,
incentive do they have to
like
model
India?
U.S.-Mexico cooperation over that?
Because
like, why aren't they doing it now? If it's so true that they would model, like, I don't understand why U.S.-Mexico model is key.
Okay, why aren't they doing it now? Because the U.S. hasn't signaled commitment and there's not enough financing. The U.S. has
Okay,
to put
why are
financing
those
in.
things key?
Why is financing key?
Why is signal like what does that even mean?
Why
Like,
is signal
why
key?
is U.S. signal needed for other countries to get on board?
Why is U.S. signal needed for other countries? So that's our last piece of evidence on the solvency advantage. That's the ETSI evidence. It says that the president has to send a signal to other countries to motivate them to join international climate agreements that are being negotiated as of 2015.
All right, I still don't know which countries
Do
are
you want me to read you the card about Mexico? This card says
No, it's
Mexico is a country that other governments can learn
It's okay,
from
I have
when
another question.
implementing REDD. Urgent engagement is crucial. If a deal
Right, I
climate
have
deal
another
is to be reached
question.
in
Right, I have
2015.
another question. So the warming advantage, you read some unique stuff that speaks to like short-term warming, how a short-term fix in preventing, reversing emissions is crucial right now. What exactly about the plan is a short-term reduction in emissions? It's you pretty
Because
clearly
planting
stated.
trees can happen immediately. We have
Okay, but how does that
common
reverse the effects of warming immediately?
Because one tree can sequester 1 ton of carbon. So think of all the tons of carbon that are in the atmosphere. If we can start sucking that carbon directly out of the atmosphere.
So how exactly does that work? Explain to me. So we plant a tree, and how long does it take for that to, that tree to take carbon?
Immediately it begins sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It's the only proactive environment.
Why is an increase in trees key? Like, I don't understand. Like, where would you plant these trees?
On land that's being deforested.
Like, land that's being deforested now? Okay.
Yes.
Which country?
Right now there's an economic incentive for countries to deforest land so they can sell logs.
Okay, I have two.
Instead of that, we make the land valuable when it has trees on it.
Okay, countries like China and India, other developing countries that stake their legitimacy on growth, why exactly does the plan get them on board?
Because the plan gives them money to prevent trees, so they'll still grow their
How much money
economies.
does it give them?
Look, it's very simple economics. Right now, it's more profitable to log. Instead, the app makes it more profitable to grow trees.
All right, last argument, I want to talk about this fungi add-on. Your SEC evidence literally says soil can be baked by the sun, important fungi are destroyed, fungi live in symbiotic relationship with the trees.
Yeah.
Why is the
And
plan
if
key
you
to...
think of deforestation happening
Okay,
globally-
why is the plan key to like fungi existing in general?
No, the fungi exist in the trees. When you deforest it, that means that they die.
All trees. How
The
does the plan...
fungi dies when the trees are deforested. When the trees are cut down, the fungi dies.
I'll take that.
Can we get that impact event score that you read on politics?
Yeah. Can we get some numbers then? It's in this 2 seating event seconds.
That's what I have.
259 used. The order,
We do know how much you left.
How much was that used? We have,
259 used. I'm not sure how much we have.
I think Whit said 622.
I would do it 253.
Cool. The order is going to be the counterplan, the critique, topicality, disease, warming.
Counterplan, critique, topicality, disease warming. Disease warming.
Did you give us a speech?
Oh, no, faster. It should just be called 2NC. Alright.
Speech 2.
2NC.
Yes, 2 and 1. Fast forward. Do you see it? It's that one there. Oh. Sorry.
Alright, ready?
Yes.
Counterplan not going for a conceit, permutation, just test, computational answer, conditionality right here first is key to negative flexibility, key, especially key to competence, testing against new affirmatives because the only way to have it for negative fairness second is 2EC, it's key to pressure the 2EC, hard to pressuring is heating for processing because the world will constantly bombard too much information, it's better to pressure the 2EC more third, is hydrological flexibility, we need a counterplan to test from all different angles, you have to be able to test at the same time to have better efficacy and decision making skills from each one conditional obviously doesn't solve strategy skew, strategy skew is another counter interpretation, one conditional counterplan, one conditional K, the add-on will be in the one and another critique will concede permutation just to computation they are sufficient to solve an ethical shift for violence or in turn or only impact this critique in the context of U.S. intervention, which they do not access because they do not change U.S. intervention policy, which means they can't get access to external offense on this floor. Now the topicality debate, topical for must only increase economic engagement toward Cuba, Mexico, Venezuela. That's key for two reasons. First is limits. Take a stand now to shape the direction of the topic before the 2EC, otherwise the affirmatives will get away with any app ever at the TOC, which makes it impossible to be negative. The Yiddish and non-economic gaps to the frame crash negative ability to be able to do specific research because there are an infinite number of types of engagement. That should no one dedicate the time and resources necessary to have the best case specific strategies. That's the best type of cost knowledge only they can offer through the comparison of specific world research strategy, which is important because it allows us to sort through information and come make decisions to come up with solutions for that over topics of education because it's important and precision because it's affordable. Sales second is ground. There are a ton of unique actions developed in for the app, but a standard set of links and check based off economic action or key to check against such a large topic proven by the fact that they try to flip all the link directions by making it not about economic action like trade and aid and instead making it specifically about environmental policy. All of the clean technology policies would still and otherwise it kills and changes the types of dissets and negative dissets and reads. It also kills fairness and also because economic education is important in a world where major economic crises happen, like the debt and deficit that we need. We need to understand economic knowledge with a focus on the environment. Trades off with that which an independent impact. Now they say we mean, but no they don't. Their evidence just says that the words economic engagement, they test the words economic engagement. That's not a reason they need our counter interpretation. It merely provides a counter interpretation for them. It merely provides a counter interpretation for them. They're an infinite number. It merely provides another counter interpretation for them that says only our app is topic, which is terrible for predictability and all the limits arguments. It's also it also doesn't solve any of our certainty or predictability, or is there an infinite number of things that have economic engagement within 5 words, but that's not a reason that makes it topical now. Environmental treaties are not economic engagement. Growth and examine the world non-economic partnerships. Environmental treaties, environmental engagement tend to incorporate international London treaties with such non-economic partnerships. All funded needs to engage in economic exchange and international environmental agreements or non-economic. Growth and AD touch the varying degrees of foreign investment. Some are emission defense lines, environmental treaties. The interactive organization we choose to examine international environmental arrangements. One of the non-economic interaction there are other domains and security arrangements in international organization. Now they say counter-interpretation tech loans, and hey, that is fine. You can be tech loans and aid, but you do not get to be environmental tech loans and aid. You get to be an economic tech loans and aid. All the reasons in the overview about why economic education is important, why they're unlimited resistance, this counter-interpretation. Also, exclusivity is better because otherwise they can't set the exclusivity is better because otherwise there are an infinite number of things that can be included with the topic. Only exclusivity says a scope for what should and should not be excluded for the topic. Now the we meet another they say we meet your government, they meet their counter-interpretation because their government you're not government economic aid, which means because the counter-interpretations are not mutually exclusive. Reason for counter-interpretation that I said they perform theirs because it's a term of art. Our evidence also cites it as a term of art. There are answers here in the context of trade, not in the context of trade exclusively economic. Or Jatsky evidence says that it must be economic. Now they're going to try to make a predictability argument here about in terms of authors, but both of our authors are professors or think tank people, which reason that there is no precision or predictability argument here. It's only a question of what is best for the base case. Now they say an Afghan argument with the US because they can't get access to US key arguments. That is bogus. They can get access to US key arguments through things like relations and manufacturing. There's no reason they get you access to US key arguments uniquely through environmental engagement. There is zero warrant for this claim. Now they say it's not grammatically correct. Yes, it is grammatically correct. There our evidence is specific to economic engagement says specific to economic engagement says it must be exclusively economic. There must be exclusively economic, which means it must be exclusively economic trade and loans and aid. Now they say literature-based checks. No, it doesn't. It's an entirely separate literature-based proven by the fact that all the linkers are distinct from the types of engagement that have been entirely offered in the status quo. Things like NAFTA are all about trade. Things like the lifting the embargo are all about trade and aid in the status quo. All Mexican development policies are all about aid in the status quo. None of this. The environmental policies are distinct. Now they say reasonability, but reasonability is in first-year interpretation is not reasonable. Limits may prove to make it impossibly negative, especially because this topic is so big already. Second is reasonability is arbitrary. Competing interpretation more judged because we make relative comparisons instead of absolute judgment, which must be subjective because the judge has to use a predetermined baseline to decide if something is good for the topic. Third is reasonability forces a moral hazard. Each round the apple just introduce a new self-learning counter-interpretation instead of trying to find the best vision for the topic. Now it's especially important you vote on topicality on this topic because there's no other limiter in the resolution. Substantial does not mean anything in the context of this resolution, which means that you have to have a check on economic engagement where it's impossible to have any limits on this topic whatsoever. Now the disease impacts a couple different reasons. There's no impact to disease. First, the past 200,000 years just prove there's no reason now it's uniquely key. We've been going into forest for a long time. Second is no zoonotic diseases, and you don't solve their evidence says that deforestation will facilitate the emergence. It says that deforestation will facilitate the emergence of zoonotic diseases, but does not say that zoonotic diseases cannot exist without deforestation. It cites other zoonotic diseases like the flu, it cites SARS, and it cites swine flu that all exist in the status quo, and if it was true that those are going to cause extinction, they already should have. They don't solve those now. Also, deadly diseases burn out because they're killed their host too fast to spread. They don't be able to spread a coherent pathogen that kills its host too fast to spread except the flu, which they don't get access to that positive evidence. And a couple other warrants. First, the Perry evidence that says that population density mitigates violence because people will be spread apart, so it will be impossible for diseases to spread. Second is also the Perry evidence says that it is impossible to cause extinction because people will build up immunity as the disease spreads, which just makes logical sense. There's no reason a long incubation period means that people can't build up immunity. Third is the Zachariah evidence that said the government response is probably to solve says that we will go and intervene in disease crisis to be able to solve with things like vaccines. Their only argument here is that it will take a long incubation periods will be unable to solve, but it is illogical. They have no evidence that says it would have such a long incubation period that the government can't develop any vaccines or anything. That is completely illogical. In fact, our evidence says there's always going to be vaccines. Additionally, there's no bird flu. There's no flu impact. 13. All the cases have been in China. Either State Harm, Europe, State so and I have to state so 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, 9, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, all this contract and contract poultry, but chicken or test positive for the virus. In other words, if you go down the third, so it's something you risk in China, you're not letting know whether there's an issue with virus traveling by people already infected. The much related with new birth flu, essentially preserved for the chest contaction, difficult with the fever, severe cough yesterday. The CDC beginning issue guidance public health clinics watch with the US had you should have said and said about the Congress tell the CDC versus that they already developed a diagnosis of the bell, but youth travelers have studied the good news. It's other proof influential by the day 7 and 9 appears to respond to antiviral drugs, Tamiflu, both Tamiflu and influenza have been used to combat passport flu outbreak. Additionally, their evidence from 06 talking about the epidemic that existed, then if it's true, that didn't cause extinction, proves that their impact is empirically denied. Now the warming advantage. No impact to warming, a lot of different reasons. First is the Mendleton evidence that says the short-term impacts are too small. Second is there's other forms of human innovation that are going to be able to solve it. Third is the IPCC predictions are flawed. They predicted increases happened before. We've seen greater than 4 degrees Celsius before within 6 years, and it did not cause did not cause this type of dioxide. They talked about. They've conceded in the indicted consensus that says that consensus bias means that people are more likely to just go along with it even though they don't actually think it's true, which is a reason to reject their consensus framing because it means that it's not actually consensus. Also, plants and animals can adapt to things like range shifting because they can move their ranges to even enhance survival. Now, oceans are resilient. Biological components can quickly respond to environmental change and genetic diversity allows for quick adaptation. The evidence also they're also resilient because they can change their breeding strategies and move to other areas that are less acidic, which means it would not lead to the same types of impact that they're talking about. And fossil free records prove that biota will survive warming. Models of two courses, scale, Williams, and why this discrepancy with the fossils historic forests having changed by climate change. Biota have much wider ecological tolerance than usually sound. The model of present day superstitions often has strong historical, cultural impact, which was often not taken into account. Models discrepancy due to the course of not the legal habits of centuries results in protective diversity, maybe an essential factor for persistence of biota for use climate change.
Okay, let's talk about topicality.
Yeah.
Is government aid topical? Under your definition.
Economic government aid is topical.
What's not, like, government aid can go towards a number of things. It can go towards, like,
We have
rule
raised
of
two
law,
specific
human
cards,
rights.
both pieces of Rose evidence that says that economic treaties or non-economic partnerships. We've also read the Jatsky evidence, which says that economic aid might be entirely economic. You could be right on the entire.
Your Jackson evidence says economic engagement includes economic instruments that engage the target country and modify the state's run foreign policy. The AF gives financing to Mexico so it reforests. How are we not
It's in the
engaging
context of
target
entirely
country?
economic engagement. It says that
Financing seems to be an entirely economic
No,
thing.
it is not
It's
entirely
just
economic.
money.
Our Rose evidence specifically says that environmental treaties are excluded from those same types of things.
It's not an environmental treaty. It's just money. If you read the AF, the only verb in
You
our
give
plan
money
is finance.
for environment. That's you talk about the treaty in 1AC cross-sex.
So
when I
no
asked you what
AF
the
can
AF did,
ever
you said
give
you
money to the
look,
environment.
when I asked you in
I don't
1AC,
think you have a piece
can
of
I
evidence.
answer your question? When I asked you in 1AC cross-sex, I asked what the AF does. You said you approve this framework, or you do what this framework says we should do, that already exists, that is an environmental treaty through the UN. That is the link to our top calendar.
Okay, sure, but if you look to the plan text, it says financing. We don't do the treaty. We don't implement any treaties. We don't sign on to
Wait, when I see cross-sex
any
said you
agreements.
implemented the treaty, I'm confused.
No, that plan text doesn't implement a treaty. The plan text finances
Wait, so
things in Mexico.
was nothing you said in cross-sex true? I'm confused. You said cross-sex.
In cross-sex, we said the treaty is what the reforestation happens through, but the plan text doesn't. That's like different. The plan text is financing that treaty.
Okay, regardless, our Rose evidence is
I
in the
don't think you
context of
have a piece of
environmental investments being distinct.
No, both of your evidence is about signing on to environmental treaties. None of
It
which
talks about how
does.
environmental engagement tends to encourage international lending over the environment. I think that is what the affirmative in the context of. It talks about non-economic partnerships that find it easier to engage with economic exchanges. It talks about countries have varied degrees of foreign investment, and we choose to examine environmental agreements as distinct.
Environmental agreements, which we are not. We are financing, which is
We're
an
financing
economic-
about an environmental project,
an
which is
economic
distinct.
instrument. So what is an economic instrument?
An economic instrument would be, as you pointed out, probably trade.
Trade only?
Trade and aid, as you pointed out, over
Aid,
economic
okay.
things. Yeah.
Aid, government aid, financing for the reforestation is through the U.S. aid. That's what finances it.
It's not just about all aid. It's
We
about
read a
being
piece of
economic
evidence
aid.
in the 2AC that says that it's government-to-government foreign aid. If that's true, why do we not meet this piece of evidence?
Our argument is that it's a distinct type of aid, or Jatsky evidence says it must be exclusively economic.
Okay.
It says
none of your
our argument is about
evidence making
it must be
that distinction.
facilitating trade.
Well, sure, but like none of that evidence is making a distinction between climate, like aid for what? Is it?
It has to
for
be
what?
aid for facilitating trade.
Which piece of evidence says that?
We will read another piece of evidence on that if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd like to see you come up.
Right, the order is the counterplan,
It's the topicality violation, the counterplan, and
topicality,
then politics.
counterplan, Nieto, then politics.
Yes.
Can you say that again?
Yep. It's the topicality violation, the counterplan, the Mexico politics DA, and the U.S. politics DA. I'll keep that to the side and I'll keep mine to the side. And on the counterplan, it's the
Can we get the donkey?
Oh, no. I can put this one other card in if you'd like.
Yeah.
Let me know when y'all are ready. We're good? Okay. Engagement requires trade promotion, cheerleader development, economic engagement, operations, trade practices, and work. So we're setting a target established, intensified, and thus increased economic interaction over time. Now the camera. Fungi Adam, no one to see claim Russell and they're winning that all forests are going to be gone. The app is obviously insufficient to solve that. They could not explain how they solve all forests ever. Second, all fungi ever are not going to collapse. That is a mischaracterization of their evidence, which is from 1999. Not all land will ever be used by deforestation. There's also no impact. Dorsey means taking all positive is less credible. No humanization problem by habitats adapt to every environment. It is a function perform multiple species redundancy, species loss without collapse. The impact on efficiency will be responding to that. If you solve the whole problem, not in the end, they said we're not going for it. We'll concede that corn biofuel is an alt cost to the environment, and we'll concede the secondary reforms. Their link unique to software does not apply to the DA. One, because it does not assume the actual passage of legislation means involvement does not suspend PC. It's only the concept talk. Second is the initiative uniqueness on the politics DA outweighs and overwhelms and now the politics DA. Nuclear deterrence outweighs and turns the case. That's a silly conflict because nuclear primacy removes every incentive for rotate proliferation and great power conflict. It bolsters US credibility and reinforces alliance contracts, which prevents outbreak of major war. That's cave. Only reform solves the nuclear conflict by sustaining research and development, which is killed by trolling. Solves war, mini tech. Gershwin 13. This is reversing dramatic. It was dispelled by the advantage. We check off the application of green tech reversion. Whereas the increasingly urgent hope is to preserve the environment. They're trolling. Then the question you said was for settlement of the trolling plus the protection parts over with the reducing substitution getting into green technology and fresh creativity. This course sustainable progress. Not actually come first to tell you especially sustainable resilience can make the environment to technology itself. We need a better relation to reduce the infrastructure of being attacking negative effects of system and music prior to that action. Solve green tech course. With the merger sustainable future become more difficult to solve. Biofarmer. This is Feldman 382. The Burma Party shows movements to the part of the species and interest in the activity. The API. We revisit policy education to the APIs. The evaluation of serious consequences of pharmaceutical innovation reforms or voting for that part of the legislature have just got activity for too much that solves disease by billion morning lighting companies. How can you from the press of ethics in 50 minutes? This would implement incentive technology rapidly analyze pathogen GTA and got research represent this drug. This might be an impermanent deterrent for future prices. Get the American best. About defense provide and profit performance schools industry. The line of the first argument is that there's no chance of anything before the election, but one delay is irrelevant. Still bipartisan support post recess. That's our 1 and C uniqueness evidence indicates that there's compromise coming right now. And all their evidence might cite other agenda items, but does not say that there would be nothing that is ever able to get done. It's not to patent for more evidence. Woman 410. The Congress spares close. The reason providing time to get things given to the bill is sponsored by both parties. The act clearly committee by early made the next argument is that he solves push, but it'll pass. But Obama is crucial. This is had him in 3335. He brought us to his election for the makes the lamp of push back controls. They can't be gunning up. The capital credit be one of the few bills to make Obama's test world. So the recognize a big problem. He says a good chance even in the election year Obama for action smart scope of the president back will help push legislation past the finish line. And with last time President Wayne, the president has been for help to focus attention for resources and great momentum how to convince that we would not have been to focus to help on board the president over the work members. The Topicality said their evidence is also very speculative. Does not say that Lee would actually have to get the legislation over the finish line. Just that there's bipartisan compromise now. They say negotiations and impact. You need to make goes here. The 1 and C evidence indicates that there's momentum and consistency all coming right now in the status quo, but a sustained push is crucial to compromise. More evidence. New bill resolve controversy. National long-term law for aid. Committee hoping to move last Thursday. Such gets to give the good momentum. Committee members for Octos of the bills language can be a massive committee interest will go more down. Second, it will pass negotiations to overcome sticking points and help for an end. Committee members will be partisan to legislation attempt to parent solve the question made over process may be brought. Partisan view principle momentum exists. Pushing PC is key. Drivers 320. Bonus parts such as percent reform bring low advantages. They could reshape the attorneys from momentum to pass business to strongly issues. We would like the administration. Welcome for proud reform to national issue. Harsh comes passion from the House of the major elections this year. And it's a bit similar to speech of momentum. We have to patch up with the House before the president's death. And the next argument is that the current bill is insufficient, but the one is the internal evidence indicated it solves. It overcomes old transparency issues and sustains nuclear research funding, which is internally, which the evidence does not apply to. It's not watered down. Conduct 13. The Providence Group 1770 trying to form the lines. House Innovation the Act. The moment is just behind the forms of to fix the law that would never meaningfully affect the impact. Control problems are over the evidence only reflects the opinion of one guy. It does not speak to actual research and quantitative information. Now they say no link to make goes here. One, our link evidence is not just in the context of immigration, it's context of economic development, how that hides the real issues of violence and drug labor, which uniquely angers Democrats and Republicans in Congress, which is a conceded link thesis. Second, Democrats link President Roach 12. Investor opposite CP is going to the media calling governments work in church talk the truth is that big party cluster of major Democratic representatives of trouble and important decisions we made with the Congress representing Chelsea transfers the negotiations council states municipality financial going to opposition jobs link. This is real and 13 not controversial and good purpose because there's been involvement to the country the political data was device proponents for the agreement because huge jobless use companies move for production lowest cost. And third is a foreign aid link. This is like foreign aid. I changed the use and innovation change response to the agreement consistent to members of Congress are attempting to exchanges. One of the legislation involved public special foreign aid is one of the electronic countries requiring enough to finance such agreements foreign aid requirements. It help cost prices out spend because their argument about their specific link evidence is a distinction without a difference. The evidence does not really say anything about it being able to generate a political momentum, which means it's not often surrounded also the link control direction uniqueness. It's a yes no question. The plain definitely sparks a fight. Now the next argument is that the first mover solves check, but the evidence only says that the U.S. needs to be a leader in terms of green technology as well as all the nuclear research funding. That's the only way to instill a signal of credibility. Even if we're able to get technology from other countries, it does not solve the perception of great power conflict. Either way, the dilemma evidence is really kind of the other red is basically it really has faulty assumptions about the way that innovation works. Or Feldman evidence has much more quantitative and qualitative data, and it says that university research funding is the foundation of our nuclear deterrent. We cannot get it from other countries. We give it first mover is crucial to our total life. The last argument is that nuclear deterrence fails, but the evidence is horrible. It just asserts that it has not been effective. You default to our Arcade's evidence. You should prove the other qualifications matter here because he's a senior fellow at the National Defense Institute and is a senior research fellow at the Center of Studies of Weapons of Mass Destruction. He cites empirical and historical evidence indicates that nuclear deterrence is the only thing that is maintaining stability here, and it solves great power conflict, which outweighs in turns any of the scenarios that they're going for. Their evidence is from 2009. It just asserts that in history, nuclear deterrence has never worked. Our impact is more proximately caused. The Caves evidence indicates that it's prevent other countries from modernizing and ensures that there's a ceiling on nuclear conflicts.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I wrote it down. 35.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the final, yeah, that. Oh, sorry, I thought you were looking at the Carrolton.
final date then.
$325? You know it. Yeah. I'm going It's just called 1AR cards. Is the stand over there?
Yeah, it is.
I see it. The order is going to be warming, disease, topicality, politics, Counterplan. Anyone not ready? First is warming is real and human use. 97% of all published climate scientists agree that's a green evidence. It's going to cause extinction. Our most evidence is that it causes state collapse and an economic collapse, which means that it causes social unrest. It also causes massive temperature rises, which means that Earth turns into Venus-like temperatures, which means that nothing on Earth will survive except for a few microbes. It also causes intense sea level rises, which means that literally everything goes into water. The impact is existential. Now, human innovation is not going to be able to solve because we need to be able to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, which means that no tech is now. We just need to start planting more trees. Now there is going to be an impact. Motto evidence and the Brandenburg evidence is incredible. It says that kids off literally all life on Earth and they're qualified paleoclimatologists. Also, the oceans are not resilient. The wrong evidence says that right now massive ocean dead zones are going to occur because the ocean is absorbing so much CO2 that it's becoming too acidic for anything to live. It says it causes massive dead zones that wipes out key species, and the biosphere is so interweaved that we don't know which species is going to cause extinction, so we need to act to protect it. Now on to diseases. Diseases are going to be the next big thing. They're definitely going to cause, our common evidence says that they're the most likely thing to cause extinction now, especially zoonotic diseases, because they don't burn out now. They say that there's no reason now is to keep it. Our Gregor evidence says that the next 5 years are going to be key because the continuation of deforestation means that every day it's more likely that we encounter zoonotic disease that we've never encountered before. Now they say it exists now, but no, our evidence indicates that new diseases are going to be encountered because that are uniquely deadly because they're unprecedented. We've never had encountered them before because unique species in that unique species in forests carry diseases that humans are not accustomed to. Now they say kills the host too fast, but first of all, our Casadeva evidence says that it's able to live without a host. Also, it's not going to kill the host too fast because people can live up to several weeks without any sense of symptoms showing, which means that they infect so many people before they actually die that it's more likely that it actually causes extinction this time. Now they say build up immunity, but I answered that above. There's not going to be any government government intervention because it kills literally too fast. That's the common evidence. Also, no vaccines are happening now because they're literally new diseases we never encountered before. None of the evidence is specific to zoonotics as a region. You should lean affirmative. Now, on to topicality. First, we meet their interpretation. REDD is economic engagement. Our bond evidence is from a policy report on international economic engagement in the context of environmental and the environment, and specifically refers to REDD as economic engagement. Now, framing A is that their evidence only mentions that we're the only ones reading evidence that mentions the actual affirmative project, which is REDD, which is the reason you should prefer our evidence. Also, B is that we're the only evidence that actually defines economic engagement. Now, we also meet their 1 and 2 interpretation, which says that economic engagement recommends that the state engage with the target country and modify the target state to run foreign policy, thus preventing the emergence of a potential enemy. It says that this strategy aims to ensure safety in particular, whereas economic benefit is not a priority objective. This is we meet their original interpretation. Now, their rose evidence doesn't define economic engagement. It's about climate treaties and not providing financing for our initiatives. Now, counter interpretation, tech, loans, and aid. The House evidence defines economic engagement with intent. It says that investment is. It says that economic engagement is investment, insurance, and aid. They don't assume the opposite evidence that says that RDD meets the standard for government financing and aid, which means that we are necessarily economic engagement. You should prefer this because of Africa. There's no U.S. key warrant on the trade topic, which kills innovation. Also, we don't explode the because of a finite number of countries, and their interpretation also allows aid. Now, it's key topic education. ITS Global 11 investment is more important than trade to international economic engagement. Also, we need trade TRF. 12 reports on carbon trading through RDD shows that carbon traders will capture RDD financing. Now, on to. This is a reason you should prefer reasonability in this instance before reasonably topical. Now on to politics, uniqueness debate. Nothing. Actually, they do not solve global warming because new technology is not permitted to solve. You need sequestration also doesn't solve disease because both their piece of evidence assumes the status quo disease is not zoonotics, which won't be handled fast enough by new pharmaceutical companies. Now, uniqueness, there's nothing going to happen before the midterms. The O'Keefe evidence is from 4/4. There's only 75 days left, and the agenda is huge. Focuses on political legislation meant to motivate voters, HTF funding, budget, and insurance. No one wants to rock the boat at all, so nothing is going to happen. Next is that PC is not key because Leahy's pushing. He's the balancing interest, mobilizing Democrats and lobbying both sides of the aisle. And Obama has empirically been absent. Our Termarello evidence is the most recent. It's from 4/13, and they're reading evidence way back from March. Now, patent laws are also dead. The legislation is too contentious, and there's been talks that it's all literally on life support, and that frustration is going to lead to an impasse. This Wilson evidence is also way more recent. It's from 4/7. Now, also there's not going to be an impact because status quo solves trolls. The Silverstein evidence says that losses are on the decline because stronger protection is not needed for small investors. It cites data. Also, the bill's not sufficient because it doesn't solve junk patents like big tech companies, which are going to keep trolling. That's a kind of evidence. Also, there's no on the link debate. We're the only ones reading evidence that's specific to our project again, which you should prefer. Avoid this association. It says that warming. This project has empirically avoided association with warming politics because forest conservation is not non-partisan issue with broad public and congressional support. This is the best evidence on the link of the Wallace evidence. Also, there's no impact because nuclear deterrence is going to fail because the faulty threat assessment, forgetfulness about history, and short-sighted policy works means that the United States does not know how to deploy deterrence, and they won't know how to in this instance. It's also reform installed KSTP 410. The news has reported on patent trolls that push to stop installed in DC. The Senator's pushed back debate for the 4th time in 2 weeks.
All right. How much prep do we have left?
253.
Awesome. We'll take it. You should tell me that one for us.
You get this word already.
Just as a creator.
Never mind.
It's correct.
just gonna borrow your computer.
Sure.
Any cards?
Yeah. Should be like speech 25.
The order is going to be the politics dissad, then the disease advantage, then the warming advantage. Alright. Ready? Nuclear turns outweighs and turns the case that sets ceiling on every conflict because nuclear primacy removes every step for rogue state proliferation and great power conflict. They not provide a warrant as to why nuclear deterrence is going to fail. It's going to be successful as long as we see the perception of being willing and able to respond. That is only possible for universities continue to be able to do research. That trolling kills that because universities self-patents to trolls. As universities self-patents to trolls, they will lose their research funding, which means they'll be unable to research nuclear development. Turns the case because it turns the biopharmaceutical industry or but as well as our ability to the biopharmaceutical industry is necessary to research to be able to change the zoonotic disease resistance. That's proven by the fact that their impact evidence cites a whole bunch of diseases that do not come from forests. Only the biopharmaceutical industry is sufficient able to solve it. Now they say it doesn't solve warm, but yes, it does clean technology. The one is sufficient to get clean technology on board, and even if there might be some, there's no reason why sequestration is necessary. We're not past the tip of when it's that's what we can say that argument, which means that you don't get access to unique offense here. Now they say then they make a unique this argument about the midterms, but no, it will pass. First, a couple reasons. First, the manager's amendment means there was bipartisan support overwhelmed things like the midterm. That's the will happen. Second, evidence is laser well that it still will pass before the midterm. It'll pass right after break. Third, it won't be watered down or canned evidence, and national as well as the national journal evidence is also recent. It's the compromise that was part of the Leahy Amendment was sufficient to be able to resolve patent trolls for this momentum. Or national journal evidence says the PC is the only thing that gets a compromise that is sufficient to be adopted, even if our evidence might be somewhat older. It's still a reason for it, and it will pass compromise now. But the White House says key term 413th. Like he's working with the goals of getting to the Senate, the Coordinate, as often as possible. The committee consider bill with them talk to the White House Democrats and try to resolve issues with very clauses bipartisan should produce packets to come support both sides of the aisle. Finally, negotiations will be able to overcome the reason why it's knocking out the Leahy evidence. Their evidence is inconclusive. Their evidence is inconclusive, just as Leahy would be able to would be able to have some negotiations. It doesn't say that that's sufficient to get people on board. Our PC key evidence that Obama's the only one who was able to march a broader coalition after it gets through committee, which is the key distinction here. The White House is key. Now they say now the link debate 84 and 8 is unpopular. One is Obama is tempted to add extraneous amendments. 2 is a lax constituency. 2 is a lax constituency. The 4 and 8 amendment lax constituency. We were specifically going to go for the 4 and 8 link because even if their evidence might be about a specific program, 4 and 8 is always unpopular. Their evidence cites bipartisan support, but doesn't say who is going to vote for the plenary site. Evidence cites a larger consensus bipartisan support. Additionally, their evidence is biased and bad. First, their first ever piece of evidence is citing a quote from a fire restoration official, obviously not qualified, and also as an incentive to exaggerate. Second piece of evidence is from a climate institute, which is also a reason as an incentive to exaggerate. Additionally, we'll concede the we meet trade argument on topicality means they would still be perceived as trade in other instances. It means all our other trade like arguments probably still apply, could get tied to things that are unpopular, like discussion of trade and the drug war. Now they say patent laws are dead because of recent things. No, we've read more recent evidence also from 413 that was about it will include fee shifting. Now they say there's no impact because status quo trolls are insufficient. Fee shifting is the only thing that deters them from getting on board. And they say it doesn't solve junk patents. Yes, it does. Even if it doesn't solve all junk patents, it's a question of universities selling to trolls, which is the only internal link that we went for. Which means as long as we win, we form some forms of trolling that should be sufficient to solve our internal link. Now the disease advantage, we're only going to go for a couple. I'm not going to go for every argument. I'm going to go for a couple. Impact defense arguments. First of all, they've conceded that bird flu doesn't cause extinction, which means they've not said a single disease that is going to escalate to extinction, which means you're very low risk of disadvantage. That's a hacking evidence. Second of all, diseases don't spread the infectious diseases. We extend the Perry evidence that as people get further apart, diseases will not spread because everyone will be dead. Second of all, it's not even, which means even if it takes a couple weeks, we do not spread to places like Madagascar and other places. Second, if people will develop natural immunity, which takes the infected and also disease will be able to burn out their, even if some pathogens might be able to live out without humans. No, not all zoonotic diseases would, which is the key internal, like their evidence cites a whole bunch of zoonotic diseases, which they are not able to solve all of them because they talk about other forms of zoonotic disease, even if they might reduce it a little bit, they don't completely solve. Finally, Zachariah evidence is the government responses are able to solve because they will be able to treat diseases, or what their evidence also cites medications like Tamiflu and antivirals that are sufficient to treat it. That's conceded internally, which means we constantly develop the medications that are necessary. And either way, before the time frame or impact nuclear trial laptops and to do currents escalate quickly, you can only die once back to the bad impact frame because the intervening actors can always help in the long term. There's no reason we need to plan trades today. We could plant them a month from now, and that would be sufficient. Which means that there's no you can turn like now the warming. There's no impact to warm for a couple of reasons. Our medicine, and as well as an NDCA Putin evidence that the short-term impacts are very small. The IPCC predictions are flawed, and they've happened before. We've seen greater than 4 degrees Celsius rise, and it didn't lead to any types of impacts or Topicality. Either way, they've conceded consensus framing is flawed because of consensus framing is flawed because it leads people to artificially go along with its reason to reject their evidence. Either way, redshift means that plants and animals can adapt, and redshift means that plants and animals can adapt. For Willis evidence says that fossil evidence prove that biota will solve warming. They have not no coherent. It doesn't lead to complete safe rise or economic collapse. They don't act as a short-term impact. They don't act as a short-term impact. Finally, oceans are resilient biological components can quickly respond to environmental change, even if there might be some acidification, genetic diversity, life for quick adaptation. That's a Kennedy event. Also, marine life is what is, and they've conceded warrants why marine life can change their mating patterns and other patterns to change the way they actually function biologically.
What?
318.
Yes, you're kind of going in and out there.
I give it a couple of minutes. Can you take this? There, my voice is back for the most part.
Should we go there?
Yeah, warming disease. Oh. Okay. Warming is the largest existential risk in this debate. It's also the only impact that the dissent doesn't turn framing issues should prefer magnitude impact because intervening actors can solve conflict like nuclear deterrence between states, and they don't even have a specific scenario for conflict, which means you should have a high threshold voting there. But global warming is already occurring in the status quo. That's a fact. You cannot dispute. You cannot negotiate with the environment. And 1% risk means you vote out because warming affects all future generations. Absent new sequestration policies, runaway warming causes massive sea level rises in temperature, Indeed increases the deoxidizing the atmosphere, make Earth a second Mars with only a few microbes left surviving. That's the Brandenburg evidence. Now it turns because the Matzo evidence says global warming causes failed states and economic collapse, which would cause states to lash out and turn their violence impacts. Now the IPCC evidence, the IPCC is proven true. Our green evidence cites a 97% consensus of the most qualified comparative climate scientists who all agree that warming is real and anthropogenic and occurring in the status quo because of carbon dioxide emissions. They say that consensus is bad. Consensus is good in our context because we have qualified peer-reviewed scientists who are not being pressured but have all come to the same conclusion with their own independent data sets. That's the green and global evidence. Now we also have a short-term economic collapse impact there. We're not going for the oceans impact, which means there's no defense. They basically spend about 30 minutes, 30 seconds here, not sufficient to mitigate the impact. Now, disease. Zoonotic disease is that way under ordinary conditions. Disease may be not a big deal, but conditions are ordinary. New zoonotic disease can hide with reservoir host and not show symptoms for weeks. No globalization means that the chance of infection exponentially increase. All it takes for the human species to go extinct is every person infects. If every person infects just one other person, that would cause a spread. Greger calls it the single greatest threat to the human race because pathogens evolve faster than we do. The time frame is short and a lot shorter than insurance. Even if we don't access extinction impact, dying from zoonotic disease still sucks and can kill billions of people. Their defense can't see the forest for the trees. Now they say we have no evidence that disease leads to extinction. But they also say it doesn't spread. Globalization means it spreads because of the great rate of interconnectedness. Now framing issues, they do not have one single piece of defense about zoonotic diseases. Zoonotic diseases are uniquely impervious because they do not burn out. They survive in their host and incubate. They also say we don't solve all of the diseases. That doesn't matter. Any one can be the dangerous one that spreads and because everyone medications aren't going to be able to solve it because no intervening actors can influence them in time. The politics is that. There's no scenario for the war and the status quo. Disease and warming are ongoing and imminent, which means those impacts should be preferred. Deterrence is also not key to solve war. Our defense says that it needlessly aggravates relations between countries, that it causes faulty threat. The other causes like faulty threat assessments, forgetfulness, and short-sighted policy making all undercut the effectiveness of deterrence, which means that they're not going to be able to solve any of their impacts. Now it doesn't turn case, it doesn't turn war because the carbon dioxide is already out of the atmosphere. They do not have any clean tech that's going to be able to take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which means that only sequestration is going to be able to solve it. Also, the pharmaceutical responses are not going to be able to solve zoonotic diseases because as long as forests continue to be cleared, we are going to be exposed to new diseases that we cannot use pharmaceuticals to respond to. Now the uniqueness debate. The bill is not going to pass. There are three reasons. First is midterm elections. There are 5 huge thumpers in our evidence. They were all conceded by the 200. We should not get any new, not cross-apply any of their evidence to this because we have multiple thumpers. First is the HTF capitalization. Second is Obamacare repeal votes. Third is minimum wage. Fourth is a new budget policy. And fifth is new insurance policy. Those things are all on the agenda before the midterm election, which occurs in only 75 days. Time is running out, and no one wants to rock the boat with contentious policy. With contentious policy, that's the O'Keefe evidence. Second is the negotiations on patents are at an impasse. Our evidence is from 4-7, which post states it says contentious talks and life support and negotiations are mile apart. They're not moving forward at all. Now third is the 1 hour evidence which says the talks are stalled. They were pushed back for the 3rd time. The bill has not even been marked up. That is a warning sign. It is not indicative of movement. All of their evidence is rhetorical posturing from people who support the bill, but none of their evidence actually speaks to vote counts, which our evidence does. It says that there's no one is on the board now. Political capital is not key. The new Will Pascoe from the 2NR that they've read also supports this. Leahy is the only one who is going to get the blame. He's the only one pushing it. The terminal evidence post dates all of their PC key cards, which are from March. It says Obama's not key to the broad negotiations. Leahy pushes solving the entire bill because he's balancing competing interests. It also says that the pressure is all on him. He is the one who's drafting the leading markup legislation. He's the one talking to Democrats, and he's the one getting both sides of the aisle on board. All of their political capital key evidence. All of their political capital key evidence is insufficient because it just talks about Obama's commitment being a good thing. It says supporters hope Obama would act, but not that he is acting. It also says that he has not mentioned it since his State of the Union address. The ununderlined part says the administration efforts are still not sufficient. Leahy is the one that their evidence is citing as well, who's the one who's making the commitment. Now, the current bill is insufficient to solve for innovation and patents. The Canada evidence talks about junk patents. Big companies are always going to be patent trolls, which means that even if universities are developing technology, the big companies who still are allowed to execute patent litigation are still going to target universities, which means that their patents aren't going to go through.
Can I get a speech back from both sides with all the evidence on the two advantages and